morning and welcome to the Exeter City Supporters Society annual general meeting. I'll simply refer to the trust from here on in. Hope you enjoyed the video. I was kind of waiting for the hot dogs and the popcorn adverts to appear, but alas, not to be. And I am working from home as are most people, so it's a living environment. So if my daughter bursts in at any time, please forgive me. If my wife bursts in with a cup of coffee for me, which is far less likely, apologies again. I should make you aware that the meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded onto YouTube in due course. So I guess none of us would have thought that when we were sat at the Phoenix Arts Centre 12 months ago, how the year might have panned out. And it's certainly strange times. So please bear with us. I trust that there aren't any elephants in the Zoom today. We'll manage this morning as best we're able. We're going to do all of the active business first, while we know we've got Corit. I know people will be keen to get away as quickly as possible. But if at the end of the meeting you have any lingering concerns, just get in touch with us. If you've got any questions that you posted to the chat function that we haven't answered during the course of the meeting, then we'll do our utmost to publish these onto our website with the appropriate answers in the very near future. So I can see that we are Corit, so there's no reason why we shouldn't just press ahead. And our first piece of business this morning is to approve the minutes from last year's meeting. So please, could I ask our members to use the chat facility to propose and second the motion? And the Trust Secretary will take the first two names who put themselves forward. So Phil, if you could confirm when we have a proposer and a seconder.
Don't have any yet.
So it's Gary Nelson who's proposing, as I see.
Gary Nelson proposing, and SWE's IO is the second name, so that can be the seconder.
Okay, so I'm going to pop the resolution onto the screen, and you can use your mouse, I think, to click on the appropriate option of approve, reject, or abstain from the vote.
Oh, yeah, I forget.
So I'll just give you a few more seconds. Okay, so I'm going to end the polling there, and I'll just pop up the results so that you can all see them. So that's approved 84%, reject 0%, and abstain 16%. So Phil, have you captured those numbers?
I will do. So
I've got them.
You've got them. Excellent. Thank you. So following that, we are going to, let me have a look at my agenda. We're going to move on to the approval of the Exeter City Supporters Society Limited financial statement from May 2020. And what I'll do is I'll pass on to Pete Holding to speak on this. Pete is our Finance and Governance Working Group lead. Pete.
Thanks, Nick. Morning, morning, everybody. As you'll probably see from the panelists, we've got Steve Bright, who is our auditor, and if there are any particularly tricky questions, I'll defer to him. The purpose of or my role today is to achieve approval of our accounts, and subsequent to that, there's an item to reappoint the trust auditors. A couple of points, general points, if I can, before we go on to take questions about the accounts and thereafter a vote about the accounts, you'll note a significant increase of £12,000 in the admin expenses. If you look at the detailed expenditure figures towards the end of the accounts, you'll see that donations and sponsorship increased by 14,000, with a very significant donation of £12,000 to the Academy. So that's an explanation for that. The cost of sales also increased by £9,000. This was primarily due to the production costs of the SJP 125-year anniversary book, which is now almost sold out and will produce a small profit. Some of this income won't be reflected in these accounts because of the timing of payment. On the other side, on the income side, you may have noted that membership and subscriptions rose by a small amount, about 3.5k, but donations dropped by £6,000. We don't have an explanation for this at the moment, but we are going to seek to understand why this is the case, and this will be part of a bigger piece of work about understanding our members and their donations, and etc. Can I take any questions about the accounts, please? I can't see the chat because
I've got the chat up, so I'm waiting to see if there are any.
Okay.
Again, if any members watching on reflection have any questions about the accounts, if you email us at inquiries@weareanexeter.city.fc, then through the trust website, then we'll endeavour to answer them.
Okay, well, if there are no questions, can I?
Well, there are a couple of questions that have popped up.
Okay, so the first one is from Ask the Eight. How many members are retained this year?
How many, sorry? I can't see the chat and it's very difficult to hear.
So how many members are retained this year?
Are retained? I can't hear you properly, Phil. It's the question.
Yeah.
How many members are retained?
That's correct, Pete.
Right. So do you mean how many members we had last year and still have, or do you mean what the actual membership number is now?
The question is retained.
Okay, my interpretation of retained is how many members that we had last year we still have. I don't know the answer, but I will get back via ownership working group and we will post that appropriately.
Phil, can you close the share screen because it's quite distracting?
Yeah.
And everybody will be able to see the chat then, unless we need to go back to it. So are there any other questions, Phil?
Yes. Do we know how many members are paying the minimum?
Similar answer to Adam. That's part of the more detailed work that will be carried out. It may be that somebody has a ballpark figure off the top of their head, but that would be from the ownership working group, Adam. So
we've certainly got that information, and we'll publish it on the website this week.
Yeah. So Alistair's asked about a book. That was the 125 years at SJP book. What's the minimum?
£2 a month.
£2 a month.
Yes,
so any further questions before we go to a vote, or any questions for Mr. Bright? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So Pete, would you like, or I'll run the poll as we did before. I'm going to run the poll for the 2019-20 accounts.
We need a proposer and a seconder first.
We need a proposer and a seconder. So if somebody could propose and second, as Michael Higgins has proposed, Martin Lawrence has seconded. So I'll give that just a little longer for people to vote. Okay, so I'm going to end the polling there, and I will share the results with you all. If you could, somebody, Phil or Pete, if you could make a note, please. You got them?
Yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you all very much.
Got it.
Okay, and so we'll move on now to the reappointment of the auditors. And Stephen, I don't know if there's anything you need to say at this point.
The only thing I need to make you aware of is I've been auditor of the trust now for some 17 years, and there is an argument that that length of time reduces my independence. You need to be aware of that. As long as I make you aware of that, then there's no reason why I can't be reappointed.
Thank you, Steve. Steve was recommended by the Trust Board for reappointment. From our perspective, he does a great job on time and is very helpful. It's about what more can you ask from an auditor? So could we get a proposer, and unless anybody's got a question, sorry.
Any questions for Stephen or Pete on the reappointment of auditors? No? Okay, I'm going to pop, but this poll says the re-election of auditors, which is slightly incorrect, but
I have a proposed, Neil Laminier is a proposer and Dave Moore is a seconder.
brilliant. Thank you. I keep forgetting that, don't I? I beg your pardon. So we'll just get a, oh, that looks good. So I'm going to end the polling there, and I'll share the results with you. If somebody could tell me when they've made the appropriate note.
I've got the numbers.
Okay. Smooth as clockwork. So now we're going to move on to the, well, Steve, first of all, thank you very much for all your help putting the accounts together, and the finance and governance group, in particular, Steve Chudley, who doesn't get to stand in the spotlight the way that Pete has this morning. But thank you very much, Steve, and thank you to Steve Chudley as well. Both do a fantastic job for the trust.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Before you go on, Nick, Neil's asked a question and Alistair's asked a question about, can we mention how many people are attending and how many people are voting? I can't see how many people are attending. All I could say is that for the auditor reappointment, 70 members voted in favour to abstain. For the accounts, 64 members voted in favour and 4 abstained. So what I can tell you is that there are 11 panellists, some of whom may vote and some who may not, and there are 79 attendees. Okay, and any other questions there? Just have a look. No, those are the 2 questions that Neil and Alistair asked. Okay, cool. So in that case, we'll move on. That's all of the official business done. Thank you all very much. We're going to move on to the presentations now. And I'm going to begin proceedings by introducing you to Richard Pym. Richard is our chair of club board, and he replaced David Lee earlier this year. And before Richard speaks, I think it appropriate to place on record our thanks to David Lee. Not only was he excellent at building grandstands, but he was also a great friend to the trust, who helped broker much of the progress we've made over the past few years. So thank you to David. If we could record that in the minutes, please. Since joining the club board, Richard has made an immediate and a considerable impact, and
I admit, slightly disappointed that Matt Taylor moved into the loan market for a goalkeeper, because I believe Richard has good pedigree in that particular area. But who knows? I think Richard injured himself playing beach cricket, so maybe he's on the injury list as well. Richard's pedigree in this is just amazing, and we're so pleased to be able to attract the skills and gravitas of somebody like him, and that experience, Richard's vast experience in business, and what we want him to bring to the board has been immediately evident. So I'll let Richard bring you up to speed himself, and so I have great pleasure in introducing our first speaker for this morning, Richard Pym. Richard, over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Nick, and thanks for inviting me to join this meeting this morning. And as you say, it's an honour to be club board chairman this season, because this is the centenary of my grandfather's last season at City before he transferred to Bolton. And of course, club legend has it that Granddad's transfer money bought St James's Park. Family legend has it that he didn't share in any of it. And in those days, footballers got paid very little. And telling me several times he got paid just £5 bonus for each of the 3 cup finals that he went on to be a member of the winning team in. Well, that segues into Ollie Watkins' transfer this summer. And I think Ollie might be on slightly more than £5 bonus. And Ollie's transfer has transformed the financial position of the club. And it's as significant now as was Dick Pym's transfer money a century before. Now, for me, the last 5 months since I became chairman on July the 1st have been a game of 2 halves, as they say, because when I joined on July the 1st, the finances were grim. Little money coming in, lots of money going out, and we could forecast when we would be running out of money. But the second half of my 5 months has changed all that, with money coming from the late summer transfers, of which Ollie's was, of course, the most significant. Now, whilst we don't have the regular income coming through the gates, we do have the financial reserves now to survive the crisis. And it also provides further cash flows over the next 2 years, as the transfer money hasn't come in just one big lump. Now, our strategy, our financial strategy, is that gate receipts and add-on sales pay the wages, and transfer receipts pay for investment. And if you muddle the two and you use transfer receipts for paying the wages, if transfers were to have a bad year, then the club is in trouble. And my objective, whilst I'm doing this job, and I know it's shared with everyone else on the board and the trust, is to achieve sustainability for the club and the trust, because we do not ever want to have to rely on external investors. But we also have a very real opportunity now to drive this club to a higher level. Our vision for the club is to be a sustainable member of League One, capable of challenging for promotion. A combination of the transfer income and the new wage cap makes that vision now more achievable. Some of our competitor clubs are in trouble. Their previously rich owners poorer, their wage structures unsustainable, and throwing money at expensive player recruitment now impossible. Our relative position has never been better in a strategic sense. Never have we had a better opportunity to succeed. And that's thanks to the work, and should I say the generosity, of the supporters over the last 20 years. Now, I wouldn't be here today in this role if this club were not community owned. I wouldn't want to be working as chairman for an owner who just saw Exeter City as some sort of temporary plaything in their life, some ego boosting status symbol. I passionately believe in the principles of community ownership, the principles of cooperation, the deep rooted values. And there's something inherently romantic in a community getting together to buy their own football club. But that community ownership has to be supported by commercial management, balancing the passions of supporters with the harsh reality of financial discipline. And that's where I hope that my experience in consumer businesses and banking can be helpful. Now, the income we've received this summer and continue to receive over the next 2 years is a tribute to the work of the academy team and the coaching staff. And I'd like to pay tribute to Julian Tagg, the academy staff, the coaching staff, and of course the players themselves for their success in pursuing our homegrown strategy. And that leads me to the current season. During the summer, we let go a lot of experienced players. Our squad now is young, and this season was always going to be a transition and one where performance wasn't guaranteed. And of course, we've all been delighted by the performance. It's been absolutely brilliant. And in football, it isn't just about the results, it's also about how you get the results. And in that, we've seen the most amazing performances where our young men have shown massive effort and resilience and their talent. And one of the characteristics that Matt Taylor looks for in his player selection is character. And we have seen that in abundance. So I'd like to pay tribute to Matt Taylor and his team, both coaching and the playing staff, of course. They had to manage a difficult mandate from the board based around the financial position, and they have managed it absolutely brilliantly. So a big thank you to them all. Now, I talked about the romance of community ownership, but there's also the romance of watching local players and seeing them develop. Well known that fans like to see local players from their own communities. So I started with Ollie Watkins, a local lad. He's managed his career brilliantly and he's developed skills every step along the way. And we have enjoyed following, participating in his journey. And we have a role now in providing pathways for other Ollie Watkins coming behind. There's another Ollie Watkins somewhere in our squad, whether they're 9, whether they're 14, whether they're 18, but there's someone else coming through. And it means that we can participate in their journey where they give their best for City and then they move on to greater things. And that's just like my granddad did 100 years ago. Thank you, Nick. You're on mute, Nick.
Beg your pardon. Thank you, Richard. Can I invite any questions for Richard?
You never told me there'd be questions, Nick.
Okay. There's always questions.
I'd be delighted. Come on. I'm here. Now's your chance.
Okay, well, everybody seems to have gone very, very shy. We've got a little bit of time when all the speakers have spoken to have a collective question round. But one last time, and any questions for Richard? Richard, I think your presentation was. Oh, here we go. What is the present state of the share structure of the club?
Okay, the share structure. Well, we had the AGM, the general meeting, 4 or 5 weeks ago now, where we took a few percentage of the shares out of circulation because we couldn't trace them. And I think that has increased the trust participation in the shares by, people correct me, but I think it's 3 or 4%, something of that order. This is the first of the checks on the share register. There are still some other shares on the register. We're not entirely sure whether we've got the right owners or not. So there may be some more work to do on that. So we've got the mixture of ordinary shares and preference shares. We've looked at both share registers. If we make any further share, something that will be in the club accounts, if we because I just answer the question in the broader sense, what's the shape of the share register? I would say that if we were to ever fundraise for investment and to issue any more shares, it would only ever be the ordinary shares. The preference shares are a historic legacy and wouldn't be a long-term part of any future share structure.
Okay, and Richard, what are your personal targets of achievement for the club over the next couple of years?
Ooh, well, that's a really good one, isn't it? I mean, I started with that principle of sustainability, and I think one of the big things we're going to decide in the next few months is what we invest in to generate income and player development, as well as keeping our eye on costs. And I think investing the money wisely and seeing the results on the field, because at the end of the day, there's no point unless we see success on the field of play. I would sort of direct everything. You could sort of hang me up for this later, but League One, thank you very much.
And there's a supplementary question to that from Christopher, who's asking, is interested to hear that the club's ambition is to become a sustainable League One team. How do you think we will achieve that? It's eluded us for so long, I guess.
Well, I think I referred to it, is we have an opportunity now. I mean, there is a wage cap, and we have a group of players who we've developed ourselves. We haven't had to hire them in expensively from elsewhere. And from next season, we'll be past any of the transitional period, and that wage cap will be absolutely firm. So a team who can develop its own players is competitively advantaged. You can't have some rich guy coming in and just dumping £3 million on the table, and the manager goes off and spends it one summer and gets promotion the next. That game has gone. So a club like ours has a relative advantage. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, because obviously it's extremely hard, but we should be able to outperform competitively because of the structure of the club. And well done to Julian and his team, who've sort of led that over the years. It's a huge competitive advantage for us, but we have to play it sensibly.
Okay, so we've got time for a couple more questions. There's quite a lot coming through. So if your question isn't answered this morning, we'll make sure that we get the answers up onto the website. A question from Gary Nelson. There's been talk of a financial bailout from the Premiership. Is that the case? And how do you think that things will be divvied up amongst Divisions 1 and 2? As we are doing okay, would we miss out and the imbalance of funds available through the divisions? So,
do you want me to talk about that, Nick? Or,
yeah,
or
if
unless,
by all means, Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, the position at the moment is it's been reported nationally, and it was I think Karen Brady said on the TV incorrectly that the Premier League were going to put in 50 million. Well, that's not the case. They had advised that they would put in 20 million, which was without any interest. So in other words, a donation, and 30 would be repayable. But the EFL refused to do that because the Championship weren't taken into consideration, but also because it's unclear as to what the Premier League would have wanted for the second 30 million. So there is pressure to bear being brought now to take the 20 million, because there are an awful lot of clubs, whilst Richard does, exceptional introduction there telling us where we sit. So we're in there are a lot of clubs, I think probably now about 8 or 9, possibly even 10, that are in a very difficult position and need some financial injection very quickly. So it's not finalised yet. We haven't had anything through. Nick and I both get exactly the same reports that come through from the executive, but it's looking like, and again, don't quote me on it, because these things change by the minute sometimes, never mind the day. It's looking like the 20 million will perhaps be donated, and that will be divided evenly. It won't be divided. There was a not to be divided, as I understand it at this point, to be divided by those who are in the biggest trouble, if you like, because that was decreed to be unfair. So there's still some more water to go under the bridge, but that's the position as it stands at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Julian. So I'm going to stop questions for Richard just there, because I want to move on, keep on track with our agenda, but we will come back to questions a little later on, and even if we don't cover them, as I said, this meeting's being recorded, so we'll have your questions recorded and we will answer them all if we're able. In particular, if I can just say to Andrew Parsons that I'll be addressing the issue that you've raised in my own words. So we now pass on to Keith Mason, the Club Finance Director, to speak on the club's audited accounts to 30th of June 2020. I should say at this time that these accounts have not been approved by either the club or trust boards, so they have been audited, and both boards will meet in the next fortnight. We will update on any issues, should there be any. So Keith, over to you, sir.
Thanks very much. And as usual, I'll show and explain two schedules, the profit and loss account, or as it's called in the documents that I hope we'll be able to see soon. Phil, can we put the documents up?
No worries.
Profit and loss account is called income statement nowadays, and we'll also look at the balance sheet.
Right. Income statement, I believe that's the right one.
That's correct. Excuse me. First of all, the income statement. This is page 2 of the income statement, which is the one I want to talk about first, because I probably ought to start with the fairly major adjustment to the accounts. As can be seen on here, we've got a prior year adjustment of £145,000, which is an increase in the profits of the club. This adjustment is due to the fact that our auditors, Haynes Watt, were not given full information when OTR purchased the old school building some 10 years ago to secure it for the club and subsequently rent it to the club. And it was this that was not accounted for properly. They were not aware that the club had the option to purchase the building. And therefore, some 10 years ago, it should have been included in the accounts as an asset and wasn't. So as you can see here, the profit and loss account for prior years, that is all years prior to 2018, has been adjusted by £145,000. £22,000 is adjusted in the 2019 accounts, and there's also a significant adjustment to the 2020 originally stated accounts. I've just seen a chat come up asking who OTR are. They're a company that was formed, it's Old Tiverton Road is the full name of it. It was a company formed by friends of the club 10 years ago who all participated in putting money into this business in order to buy the old school building, so the offices and bars, the building that they are in. So moving on to the actual accounts for 2020, can you scroll up the other way, Phil?
Yeah, certainly.
See the first page?
That's
fine, thanks very much.
Okay.
Yeah, just scroll a little bit further down so that the 4548 figure is right at the top of the screen. That's perfect. Thanks very much. So in spite of COVID, you can see that turnover has increased by best part of £500,000 between 2019 and 2020. This is partly due to the generosity of fans and commercial partners who didn't take refunds for season tickets and for their commercial payments that they made for hospitality, instead donating funds to the club. In spite of losing 5 games last season, gate income was up by almost £250,000. Part of that is due to the EFL run. As you remember, we got to the semi-finals of the EFL trophy, and that figure includes bonuses for participating in that competition and a win bonus for the several games that we won. Commercial income was also up by £100,000 last season, and Football League income, which this is funding that we get centrally, that does tend to increase each year, and that went up by £150,000 last season. Moving on to the cost of sales. Again, you can see that that's up by about £500,000 last season compared to the previous season. The major cost within that, 3.8 million of that 5 million cost, is in wages and salaries, and they were up by almost £400,000 last season. That includes players' wages. Next line is administrative expenses. As you can see, we made almost £300,000 saving there last year, partly due to the fact that, as Richard alluded to in his presentation, we realised that cash was starting to run out. I'm not saying it was imminent, the cash running out, but as you're aware, we do projections for 3 years in advance, and we were estimating early this year that we will, if things carried on as they were, we were likely to be running short of money during 2022. So we took some steps to reduce costs, most of these being in the administrative area. These costs have also been helped because of the COVID crisis. We've had to close the office, and therefore we've saved some costs in running the office. Next line is other operating income. That has increased by £400,000, and the majority of that income is due to the furlough scheme. The government have paid us for furloughing staff, and that accounts for almost all of the £400,000 increase in that income. That then nets out to an operating loss of just shy of £1 million, significant improvement on the previous season, where we had an operating loss of almost 1.6 million. Next line is transfer fees. And of course, this is up to the 30th of June 2020, so Ollie Watkins transfer is not in this. The transfer income of 450,000 is due to the sale of Jay Stansfield to Fulham, and also income that we received on the back of Chelsea's loan of Ethan Ampadu to Leipzig. They got a fee for that loan, and we're entitled to a percentage of everything that Chelsea get for Ethan. Can we just scroll down a little bit more, Phil?
Yeah.
Just a couple more lines. That's perfect, thank you. So the next line, interest receivable, that's obviously down on the previous year for two reasons. First of all, we haven't got quite as much money in the bank as we had, and interest rates have also fallen. So we finish up with a loss before tax of £560,000 compared with £680,000 loss last season, and because we've made a loss, we get a little bit of tax back from the revenue. So our loss after tax for this last season, £495,000 compared with £594,000 loss season ending 30th of June 2019. Can we move on to the balance sheet now, Phil?
Next one down. Yeah. Is that the one you want?
Further down, next page.
Yeah.
There we go, that's it, thanks very much. So it won't be immediately obvious to you, but part of the transactions necessary to put in the accounts because of the restatement of the accounts due to the OTR purchase is that the tangible assets are higher, have been restated for 2019, and as have creditors, to show the amount of money still owed to OTR in relation to any potential purchase of that. So just to go through the other elements in the accounts, you'll see that stocks have almost doubled year on year. That's almost entirely due to the COVID crisis. the stock in the shop was much higher than we would normally anticipate, and that's entirely due to the shop being closed and us not being able to sell as much as we normally would. Debtors are also increased, and that again is partly due to COVID, because businesses were not open for business, and it's been more difficult for us to collect cash. Although I have to say I've got no concerns about the debtor balance and us being able to collect all of the cash that is due to us. Next line is cash at the bank, and as I said earlier, that's reduced. And in a situation where the club is making losses, then cash is going to drain away. Can you just scroll down a little bit more, Phil? Thank you. The next line to look at is creditors, and the creditors, we've got creditors split into two figures. First of all, creditors that are due within the next 12 months. And then a couple of lines below, we've got creditors that are due more than 12 months in advance. If you add those two together, they're virtually identical numbers. That's it for presentation of the accounts. Just to finish off by saying that, as we always say, and has been mentioned earlier today, we are constantly reviewing the budgets and cash flows for the next 3 to 5 years in order to make sure that we have a sustainable business. And as Richard mentioned earlier, it is our intention to ensure that the club stays within the stability range and we break even each year. That's it for me. Thank you.
Phil, brilliant. Thank you. So I think there are some questions that have come through, Keith. So can we get a ballpark as to wages as part of the 3.8 million? And that's reflecting on the 1.5 million. That is the new cap. Okay.
So wages, the budget for wages that Matt was given for last season was more than 1.5 million. And hence, as Richard mentioned in his presentation earlier, I believe all the players who were out of contract at the end of last season were released in order to bring the salary cost down. The current playing squad is made up of 50% of the players are under 21s. And in the calculation for the salary cap that we have to do for the Football League, under 21s are excluded. So as things stand at the moment, we're well inside the 1.5 million cap, and I expect that to carry on.
Okay, thank you, Keith. We've had a question. Do we have a provision for bad debts?
Yes, we do.
And if so, what's the value of that provision?
Okay, the provision for bad debts is relatively small. It's about £8,000. That is calculated based on a couple of debts that we have in the books that we are a little bit iffy about. But as I said in my presentation, the great majority of debts with full confidence of collecting the money.
Okay, and has the club taken advantage of HMRC R&D tax credits, which I believe are available?
Yes, they are, and it is something that we are looking at the moment. We've not taken advantage of it yet, but we are in discussion with our auditors about what might be possible through that scheme.
Okay, so there's a question here which Keith, if you can answer it, that's fine. If not, I can probably return this to Justin, which is, with e-sales booming online, what is the club's plan to increase web sales? The business I work with have 100% growth in this area. Is that one for Justin?
It is one that's more for Justin. All I can say is that the recent appointment of Sarah to look after the shop will improve our e-sales, I'm sure.
Okay, so we've run over time a little bit, but I think there's a couple of quite important questions here. So if you don't mind, I'll ask them. Are you concerned at the creditors total of 2.5 million, and who is the largest creditor?
The largest creditor at the moment is the trust, which is 800 and some thousand pounds, and I'm not concerned about it. No.
Okay, and why are you so confident that the money due from creditors will eventually come in?
Well, as Richard said earlier, we've had a big chunk of money for Ollie already. We're due more money next August and the following August. So that's why I'm confident that all of the creditors will be paid.
Okay, and finally, the immediate liabilities have ramped up by 1 million. Are we able to postpone any of this?
No, and again, the reason for that 1 million shift is because of the trust loan, which has moved from long-term creditors to short-term creditors.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Keith. I'm going to draw a line under that now, but we can come back to questions.
Yeah, fine.
And so finally, I will have no need to introduce Julian, who is going to update us on football matters, the academy, the first team, and I suspect that the women's team as well, which are going great guns at the moment. So I'll share my congratulations to Julian for the brilliant results this week, both in the EFL Trophy and in the Under 16 Cup. That really shows how strong we are right throughout the squad. So Julian, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for those comments as well. Much appreciated. And yours, Richard. Thank you very much. So good morning to all. And as Nick's mentioned, I'm addressing you from a slightly different seat this morning. Today, my brief is to underline the position regarding all aspects of football at Exeter City. Everybody knows I love a quote. I'll start with one. Stephen Hawkins, bit of a hero of mine, actually. Forgive me, I won't do the voice. It's quoted as saying, as intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. And with the excellent addition of a hugely experienced board chairman in Richard Pym to control the boardroom, and I use that phrase advisedly, and Nick Hawker, our trust chair, involved integrally in all aspects of the business across the piece, I believe we are doing just that. So I'm not sure if it's 5, 6 or 7 years as addressing as chairman. I'm addressing you from a slightly different seat, as I say, this year. My remit now is twofold. External affairs is an ever-expanding role which involves representing our club on a variety of boards and committees across the city, the county, and of course also nationally. Important locally is the seat on the Livable Exeter Place Board and also the Visitors Recovery Boards, chaired by Steve Smith and Charlie Courtney respectively, which has ensured that our club is at the forefront of understanding the direction that our city may need to take to, in the first place, survive the impact of this pandemic, and then ultimately to thrive. Looking at the national football picture with the fluid, ever-changing and threatened position faced by 3 EFL divisions, it's a picture that moves ever faster and becomes ever more complex. This emphasises the need to ensure that we have a strong voice, not only at the EFL table, but also an ability to liaise with and influence other EFL divisional members, and thus maximising our opportunity to ensure that the plethora of changes and proposed changes at all times reflects our own club and trust position and direction and intention of both, as I say, the club and our trust. An example of this would be perhaps the now defunct to a degree, I believe, Project Big Picture, but also other initiatives aimed at the national rules and objectives of and for football. And I'm sure we've all seen Matt's comments about the substitutions, which we voted against on his advice. There is an example, not only at the EFL, but importantly also, more so recently, the EFL and the Premier League. So with weekly calls, meetings, and a veritable deluge of communications, which we all get at the club, whether that's Nick or Justin or myself, ranging from COVID direction to fixtures considerations to financial problems and issues to various discussions and views on football matters. This space is busier than ever. So I'm in my third year as the nominated League Two support to the divisional representative, and the seat that I occupy on the EFL commercial board comes with that. My role has been to liaise regularly with at least half of the division, sometimes more, over the plethora of issues across a multitude of problems which have been hugely amplified since March. Further, but still related, our dedication and commitment to academy football, it dictates that we must have a strong representation, again, to protect our principles and vested interests in this area, something that has enabled me to gain a seat at the table of the EFL Youth and Player Board. It's here that the progress on the unfairness, which I spoke of before, of the EPPP system were being addressed and gaining traction until we hit the current pandemic crisis. Both positions facilitate the opportunity to advise, guide and influence the League Two football family, but also importantly, the EFL executive. Outside of that, the role of director responsible for football is a remit I've held probably for some years, 20 maybe. And anybody who ever heard Steve P speak, and I think you all did on numerous occasions, would know that he said on numerous occasions that he wasn't as titled the director of football, but he, as he described it, an aide to the manager. So in that context, very little has changed. And as for the president bit, which I've now been endowed with, it's a massive honour for which I'm extremely grateful to all. And as always, I will use it to promote our club in any and every way I possibly can. So further, more detail on the football. Last season was massively disrupted, not to mention convoluted, due to the COVID crisis we all still face today. A destined top three finish, a position or above that we'd occupied for most of the season, and indeed the week before the season ended, that would have meant automatic promotion, culminated in yet another visit to Wembley. The less said about that particular event, probably the better. What can be taken from the last season was that it was another year of positive progression. The highlights perhaps were two great semi-final matches, a game at Wembley, which we already agreed we won't talk about, being narrowly beaten with a very, very young side in front of a full house in the Carabao Cup against Portsmouth, and there is so much more. The manager and his boot room, all of whom I will talk more of later, not to mention the playing squad, many of whom have had that fateful day we don't talk about fresh in memory. Alongside the lessons and learning that accompany such a devastating defeat, they live, many of them, to fight another day. And I know some of them are particularly determined to put that wrong right. So having been at the coalface of the football direction since our inception, perhaps I've learned, having lived through it at least 3 times, a recurring pattern that ultimately emerges. And I think Richard referred to this to a degree. What does that actually mean? It means that there's usually a 5-year cycle in the evolution of a squad of players into a cohesive and dynamic team. Sometimes that process can be accelerated. One way is to inject a serious amount of cash, as we've seen so many clubs do and continue to do. Or another, sign a couple of particularly expensive but talented players that perhaps should be operating in the league above, accompanied by a competent squad of depth and some developing youth players. Then that process sometimes can be accelerated, 4 years, maybe even 3. But if all that is considered, it must be done alongside which teams arrive into the league, into our league from above, and equally important from below. Who are splashing the cash, or just as often going bankrupt? It's from that point a promotion assault on the league can never be certain, but at least the points outlined give us the opportunity to understand what's required, what's possible, and our efforts and intent can be better quantified. As an example, somebody suggested a year or so ago, I should be delighted of the arrival of Salford. And my reply was that I really look forward to meeting the 4 millionaires and the billionaire. Now it seems we've got a couple of film stars involved, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney at Wrexham, who've chucked in a measly 2 million. Backed further, it looks like, by Russell Crowe shortly from recent reports. They may be a spoiler on our league in the not too distant future. But the big question is, how long will they last? My point is, as a fan-owned club, we cannot, as I believe we don't, always just behave as fans. We have to understand the realities, as pointed out previously, and continue as we have always done, to punch above our weight. To that end, the succession planning process of appointing the right staff in the boot room, and of course, most importantly, the appointment of the right manager, is beyond critical. And if we look at it in a little bit more detail, Marcus Flitcroft, our analyst, came via our academy. Dan Green was a young player, came via our academy, is a superb coach. Wayne Carlisle, an ex-player, also works and came through our academy. And our manager was not only a past player, but also came via to us as the under-23s academy coach. It's not there just to produce the players, and it's not an accident. It's also therefore no accident that the team is quite literally, as we've already heard today, littered with homegrown talent. And whilst we're all well aware of the club's progress has been underpinned by income from player sales, Story, Ampadu, Stansfield, I think we forget Crescenti, as Keith was talking about a minute ago, but I can't tell you a number, but it's over the 500,000 mark. And of course, Watkins, all relevantly recent. Facilitating a much needed and welcomed injection has always been important, but even more so in the current circumstances. But my point is, equally importantly, it's what the boys who stay with us facilitate and give us. Jay, Collins, Sparks, Key, Randall are those that you see every day, and those that are getting ever closer. Seymour, Dean, Dyer, Kite, Nelson. I use Nelson because I can't say his surname. Not only on Saturdays, but also keeping us inside, as Keith mentioned, the new salary cap. And despite being immersed within it daily, even I find the volume of hugely talented players emerging hard to believe. And indeed, there's more to come. You'll now have heard, I imagine, quite a lot about Sonny Cox, just 16-year-olds, 2 goals for the 18s last week. And not forgetting 15-year-old goalkeeper Harry Lee, who was on the bench recently. And they make no mistake, they may have been there because we had injuries, but both of those are good enough, not far away in their own right. However, within the academy, what we've decided recently is to hatch a cunning plan. Our plan from now on, all players in the academy will play out of position, all under false names, in a new kit. The kit will incorporate a large hoodie. This will continue until they're all signed as full professionals for us. And I joke, but of course, seriously, I can't and won't rest until the unfairness of this EPP is addressed. We did make quite a significant change in our negotiations with Aston Villa. They were far more sensible and progressive than they have been before, and that's a good step change, which I think the Premier League understood. But we still need to address and make those permanently unchanged. And progress, as I said earlier, I felt was being made, but the pandemic took over. And what are the other groups of players? Our under-18s are into the 3rd round against Bournemouth of the FA Youth Cup after beating, who was it we beat? I think it was Plymouth, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Plymouth. I forgot for a second, in the 2nd round recently. And Sonny got 2. The under-16s having won away at Luton, a long away trip, a great piece of education for them to become Southern champs, and a tough game, I have to say. And on Wednesday night, they went on to beat our long-term excellence target, Crewe Alexander. I have to say, in the end, somewhat convincingly, after a sticky start, 7-3, to win the National Under-16s Floodlit Trophy. That includes all Category 2 and Category 3 clubs, and we're a Category 3 club. So that puts a bit of perspective on it. I'll return to that, but if I can refer briefly to my opening statement, that it takes time to build a squad, we may, with a bit of luck, be in front of schedule now. Imagine for a moment how good this very, very young team that we've got now that we see may be next year, with a year under their belt in league against league opposition. To be in this position, 13 games unbeaten, is testament to the skill, expertise, and a determination to succeed, alongside a quite ridiculous work ethic, which exudes from our manager and is manifested to a man in his staff within the boot room, and I pay tribute to them. A quick word on our football workplace. If you go to the Cliff Hill training ground, you'll find it hard to find exactly how it should be, which is so different in so many clubs. You'd be hard pushed to see the difference between who are our club staff and who are our academy staff. The whole youth to first team process is absolutely and fully integrated, designed and committed to achieving our own big picture. Our youth is something that's always been defended and supported by the whole club right the way through. It's something we're all very proud of, and the whole Cliff Hill training ground staff have been congratulated, thanked, and if they can get their noses away from the grindstone for a moment, enjoy the accolade. There's no Cat 3 academy even close to achieving what's been achieved by ours. Neither is there a Cat 2. We're no ordinary club with no ordinary academy and no ordinary determination to do things differently. And a further word about the Cliff Hill training ground, where the success emanates from that facility, and an immense amount of pure hard graft and long hours take place. I'm sure it's something you all realise and recognise. And whilst we have arguably one of the best training grounds in our division, when you consider the outdoor facilities, certainly the addition of the 3G is considered, we probably, less arguably, have the worst indoor facilities. Our gym, if you can call it that, our boot room and our admin facilities and office facilities, they're probably arguably the worst in the division. And it reminds me a little bit of our old away end. But I'm pleased to say there is much consideration in all the boards as to how this can be improved. And as soon as feasible and possible, which will be great motivation and just reward for our football staff, and for the club and the trust as a whole, for the immense contribution that it makes to our club. So it's not my remit here, but allow me just a second, the grace, to thank another part of the ECSC family, the CCT and Elaine, who is a valued trustee. The work they have done to continue for our local community, Greater Exeter, on behalf of our club, ensures the reputation of Exeter City Football Club is held in the highest regard, in the highest of places. It's the birthplace, if you'll pardon the pun, of our TOTS sessions that are the next generation on the pitch. It's the conduit for the junior Grecians that fulfill the same objective off of it. Equally important is the advancement of the profile, opportunity and success of our relatively new Women's Development Centre and its 2 teams, soon in the planning to be 3 teams next year. CCT is extremely well supported by the club in every way possible. It is therefore only right that I say thank you to the club and particularly to the trust for the important part they play in so many ways. So I commend this report to the AGM and thank you all from the heart for the magnificent effort and unrelenting dedication you all show towards the cause that is the Exeter City family. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Julian. We have a couple of questions. The first from Malcolm Tipper, and I think this has been in the news quite recently. Have ECFC any plans to restrict heading during training?
No, but I've been thinking about this recently, and there was a recent approach from the university and they wanted to do some research, and I fit into 2, one, do I want to change what we do? Not really. 2, do I have Alzheimer's? Probably. I'm finding it hard to remember names. And I think it's time now that our club became actually involved in that. So I will be. It's something I actually did think about with everything that's going on. These things come back and back, and it seems almost compelling that we become involved in it. And the university want to become involved in it too. And I think I shall contact them to do exactly that. So I take your point, and we'll be furthering the progress on that area. Thank you for the question.
Another one, Crew in the 90s built a production line and become known for it, and it led to them punching above their weight in the championship. Can we be the new Crew?
I think a few years back, I was at one of the meetings that we go to quite often, Nick, sometimes with Justin, and I remember somebody saying that we were aiming at that. And this is a few years back, and he said, Julian, you're way past that already. And if you look at, and so I think that's actually the reality. I mean, I still think they have an excellent youth policy there. I think they still do. But I think the difference is, as I mentioned and alluded to, when you go to the Cliff Hill, you find it hard to see the delineation between the two. And that's what's important. Dan Green knows and understands how it works. Wayne Carlisle, they know the kids, they know the 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds, they know, and Matt, of course, accelerates their process. We've got some 15-year-olds playing with the first, that's unheard of. So whether or not we can continue that, as I mentioned in there, I didn't mention it for fun, I mentioned it because it is important, the picking of the right people in the boot, for the manager, of course, and the boot room, and especially with Richard's comments at the beginning, Matt was given a really tough starting point with what happened with COVID, and it's still pretty tough. It's eased up a little bit, but we have to be very careful and cautious. We can't go throwing it around. It's not right. So I think I have to say, I'm going to be very careful, but I think we're already there. And looking at the numbers that are coming out, as I said, I'll quote my own thing, is I can't quite believe what they've achieved. So you always try and set out for some kind of target or vision of how you'd like something done. But they've not only have they taken it, but they've amplified it hugely. So I think, as we all are, we're delighted with that progress. So whether we can do that into the championship, that's. But if again, and I mentioned it in here, it's about the timing. If it comes right, we could have a shout at getting at the top of that division. If we can hold on to them, if our finances are right. It's like, as everything in football, there's multiple facets to it. It's not one simple line. So, and I think we're working towards becoming as good as many of those facets as we possibly can.
So I'm going to ask Julian. There's an awful lot of praise being put onto the chat room. I know you've certainly outdone both Richard and Keith so far, but just one last question then, if that's okay. What is the strategy for retaining our excellent academy talent so that we gain the benefit rather than having to sell our young players to maintain our financial position?
Well, the important thing for people to realise is at the 16-year-old point is really the cut-off point. Once they've signed for us as a player at that point, so the Football League allows them to, and other clubs, to sign them at that point. They don't have to sign, even though they might have been with us from 10 years old. And there is then a set fee, as we all know, which I think is unfair and I've been railing against. Some clubs are realistic with that. Sometimes you can change that if there's lots of clubs that come in and there's some competition. But effectively, at 16, if a player says he doesn't want to sign, he doesn't have to. The club take him and we do one of two things. We accept a fee from them or we go to tribunal. And that's a judgment because the tribunals are actually quite expensive. When we come across a situation like Aston Villa, I think they were sensible with what they did. The sell-ons are very good, so there could be another Watkins in the offing. But again, like Watkins, what is it, 4 or 5 years, and it nearly didn't happen. If they'd have got promoted, won the last game, he would have. So we can't rely on that. So if we try and keep them after 16, and I think if you read the back page of the Western Morning News, what Matt is saying, the whole back page is saying this is where these players should stay. So we're trying to not entice, because it's truth. The truth is they're better served by staying with us. If somebody from Chelsea or Man United, Man City offers your son 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10,000 pound a week for the next 3 years or 4 or 5 years, what are you going to do? That makes a tricky decision. However, the other side of that coin is that once they're with us, that's where they do develop. Look at the names I read out, and some of those will go on. So that's the bit we got to change, the fixed fee prior to 16. And that's why I said if we can get them past that, then it's an open marketplace and the decision making is ours. But before that, it's something that's structured by the league and needs to be changed.
Thank you, Julian. So I'm going to draw a line under the questions for Julian there so that we stay on track with our timescales. There are other questions and we will publish the answers on the website. Please give us a little time to gather those together. And if we actually have a name of who's asked the question, I'll endeavour to ensure you get a personal response from myself as well. So now we move on to the declaration of the 2020 Trust Board election results, and I must hand over to John Street.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you and welcome everyone to this morning's Trust Board meeting. As we are all aware, this is the first time that the Trust elections have been conducted via electronic means, although for this year only there were also a small number of paper ballot papers sent to those Trust members for whom we did not have an email address. In total, there were 1,095 electors who voted via the electronic system, with a further 28 voters returning their ballot papers within the timescale. This gave an overall number of voters at 1,123, which translates to a turnout of 34.67%, considerably up on what it has been previously. So with that background, the result of the ballot is as follows. As returning officer for the Exeter City Football Supporters Trust elections, I hereby declare the number of votes recorded for each candidate is as follows. Mark Cordell, 684. Douglas Gillard, 621. Nicholas Hawker 835, Luke Jones 470, Kaylee Jade West 809, Alistair Yates 342. And I therefore declare that Mark Cordell, Douglas Gillard, Nicholas Hawker and Kaylee Jade West are duly elected. If you bear with me a moment, I'll try and quickly just share that result with everybody so at least you can see there on the screen. So congratulations to the 4 that are duly elected, and thank you for everyone taking part this year. And can I also add my own thanks to those behind the scenes who have helped me deliver what is my first foray into electronic voting, and I'm very pleased that we've turned out with a positive result rather than our friends across the pond. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, John. As always, great. A great job by yourself, and I know that there's been an awful lot of work by our comms group to get the electronic voting working. It's something that our members have wanted for some time. It's great to get that over the line. So thank you very much indeed, and a great turnout. Let's try and push it a bit harder next year. Just out of interest, John, do you recall what the turnout was last year?
I had a quick look back, and I think it was in the region of about 26%.
Okay, that's
we're about a third up on that.
That's great. Thank you very much. And my congratulations to Doug, Mark, and Kaylee, and commiserations to Alistair and Luke. I do hope that you try again next year. So drawing towards the end, a few words, well, more than a few words from myself. Phil, our secretary Phil has given me 10 minutes. In your dreams, Phil. But I'll get through these details as quickly as I'm able, and I'm going to try and update you on all the things that have occurred during the financial year. But it's fair to say that a significant amount of work has been accomplished since then. And given that we're now 5 months into our new year, I think it appropriate that I mention some of the things that have occurred since. But of course, I should begin by thanking all of our members and the wider support for their incredible generosity when the pandemic kicked in, not least because between the closure of the previous last season and the start of this season, members and supporters donated and forewent refunds to the value of £61,767. It's a huge amount of money. And I recall when this was going on, there were one of the email groups that I belonged to, League One, League Two, where lots of clubs were boasting about how much they were raising from their own clubs, and some of them were marginally more than us, a lot of them were a lot less than us. And I had great pleasure in informing people that, well, of course, that's on top of the 100,000 that we already donate, and on top of the 12,000 that we donated towards the Stars campaign. So last year, our members and supporters donated £173,767. It's truly humbling, and thank you all so much, our members and members alike. Last year, I know was a tough AGM, as I recall, and many of you expressed concern at the evident falling of cash reserves and the looming cliff edge that would mean we would run out of money shortly, and it's been mentioned a couple of times today already. Even before the AGM, we had a dedicated subcommittee looking at these issues, and that work continues today. There is a subcommittee of the board known as the Budget Options Group. You should always take care when you're naming your groups. And unfortunately, it's often, where's Nick? He's at the bog. But an excellent group with some excellent individuals on it who are working incredibly hard on behalf of the club. They've suggested some cuts and controls prior to the end of the last season that the club have adopted. And it's our aim to bring us to a break-even or at least cash positive state by the end of season 22-23. And this process hasn't been altered by the good fortune of the Ollie Watkins sell-on. We've worked and will continue to work on the basis that we do not want to be reliant on windfalls from player sales or cup runs. So in mentioning this, I have to thank Keith Mason, our finance director, for producing multiple forecasts that have been required to reflect the ever-changing strategy with regard to when fans might be allowed back into the stadium. And of course, this is critical to our planning. Keith has been producing forecasts like they've been going out of fashion. Every time there's a rumor that we're going to have fans back by August or October or Christmas or January, up pops another forecast. I'm led to understand that Keith has now given up his Excel spreadsheet for a crystal ball, but we're making great progress. And as I say, the work continues, and we will help to shape the future, both in preparing forecasts, but also justifications around capital projects that we may require to drive revenue generation, or indeed, where appropriate, revenue protection. Last year, Malcolm Tipper put a resolution to the trust that was to inform various authorities around the blueprint for our model of ownership. I have to say, largely due to COVID, we've had a great opportunity this year to put ourselves in the spotlight. We've done a lot of radio and TV on Talk Sport, Good Morning Britain, BBC Worldwide Service, even a couple of American sports magazines. They were largely due to our links with Chattanooga FC. We'll continue this work. It's something that we've always done, but I think it's been more prominent this year. We're active members of the FSA, and we have made our local MP aware that there is a Westminster Hall debate this week around the governance of our game. I'm sure he'll take an active part in that, or maybe not. We'll see. But all of this will continue, and Malcolm, thank you for the resolution. Earlier this year, we published onto the website a trust strategy document, a 5-year plan, where we make it very clear our aspiration is to be a sustainable League One club. So I invite you to take a look at that document and please feed back to us your thoughts. And of course, whilst you're there, have a look at Dr. Mike Finn's review of the trust, the audit that was requested by Dr. Dave Trahan. That's also alongside it. And again, please read it and feed back to us. There are documents that the Trust Board will, I'm sure, refer to during the next 12 months. At club board level, the Trust appointed board directors have been very active. We've been prominent in such areas as safeguarding, the club's stance on sponsorship from gambling companies, or the fact that we wouldn't be prepared to take sponsorship from gambling companies. And regularly and often uncompromisingly, we challenge on matters of governance and finance. Elaine Davis represents the Trust on the board of the Exeter City Community Trust and ensures that the club upholds our ethical approach to matters. Pete Holding is a key member of the Governance Subcommittee and Budget Options Group, and Clive Harrison is currently the director responsible for safeguarding. And all of those are big responsibilities, and they execute their duties extremely well. And we should all be extremely proud of the work that they do, as should they. Moving on to the Trust Board itself, we're sad to say goodbye to a stalwart of the Trust, Pete Martin. We were able to present Pete with an engraved goblet during the week. It's pretty hard to do on Zoom, and I can only thank him on behalf of us all for the time and energy and commitment that he's given the trust over a number of stints on the trust board. Pete was, in fact, communication and engagement lead, and over the years built a quite brilliant team, I think. And this year it's delivered real benefit, creating video content, and some of which you saw at the beginning of this AGM. There's podcasts being produced now. I think the first one has been released. Significantly increased social media activity and a restyled website. I'm pleased to tell you that Will Barrett, who was elected last year, has taken over that role from Pete. But Pete, thank you for everything that you've done for the trust. I know it's been significant, and we, of course, we wish you well. We also have to bid farewell to Clyde Matthews, our former membership secretary. Clyde has been instrumental in helping to manage our corporate memberships, which we introduced as he became membership secretary, as well as keeping excellent records and a clean and tidy database. I know he was always up to speed on his correspondence, particularly if somebody should forget to pay their subscriptions. So Clyde's role has recently been taken by Celia Lohman, and you may have seen Celia's introduction on the Trust website. And we're already learning about how Bundesliga clubs attract new members. Celia was a volunteer at Borussia Mönchengladbach. The opportunities to meet face-to-face have been limited so far, but we're all looking forward very much to working with Celia and hoping to boost our membership. On to community matters. Doug Gillard is our community lead, and he has been instrumental in setting up our friendship with the Exeter Community Initiatives charity. COVID again has sadly limited the amount of work we've been able to do with them, but please check out their website. They do some fantastic work, just like the City Community Trust. Some amazing activities going on, and they are an excellent fit for our community-focused trust-owned football club. Richard Knight is our ownership and members working group lead. He's responsible for arranging these Zooms, the forums today, and along with Celia is about to migrate our membership database to a new solution that will be accommodated within the club's new ticketing software. There'll be more news on that in due course from both ourselves in respect to membership and of course the club in terms of ticketing. Last but not least, Finance and Governance Group, which is led by Peter Holding. They've had an enviable task this year of guiding the trust through the club's new Articles of Association, the Governance Manual, and the Club Trust Agreement, which have recently been uploaded to Companies House following the general meeting. As a result of that, we've also produced a definitive club shareholders register. And it would be remiss of me not to thank Nigel Banks for the excellent and painstaking work he undertook. He's reunited over 3,000 shares with their lost owners. And in doing so, and in writing off some of the unclaimed shares, the trust shareholding, and this was asked earlier today, the trust shareholding has increased from 53.92% to 57.85%. So this work now opens the door for the pursuit of our strategic aim to reach 75% shareholding. I'm not sure if Nigel is listening, but sincerely, thank you very, very much. And I should add, because many people have contributed to the tidying of the shares, particularly from the Ownership and Members Working Group, Mark Cordell, Dr. Dave Trahan, Richard Knight, and Paul Farley. So thank you to you all for your efforts. We've got there. Tiny bit of work to do still, but feeling much more comfortable about it than we've done for a while. More recently, I have to tell you that on the request of the club, we have temporarily ceased paying the monthly instalments that make up our £100,000 annual donation. The money is being held securely by our finance officer, Steve Chudley. At least I hope it's not under his bed. And this is so the club has the opportunity to assess our liability for corporation tax and whether it's better for them to have the money or for the trust to hold the money, frankly. And before we restart the paying of those installments, we will be seeking members' consideration in respect of whether this money should be considered a donation, as it has been, or whether we should revert it to a loan. And with the advent of the new capped playing budget rules, the reason for making these payments a donation is now passed. So we will be getting calling on our members to express a view as to whether this should be a donation or a loan. Everybody, I think without question on the trust board massively regrets that we were unable to properly celebrate our 20th anniversary this year. And it's right and proper that at appropriate times we look backwards and reflect upon the massive effort that was made by those people who started the trust and those who have carried it forward to where we are today. But I can think of no better compliment to those people, to those trust pioneers and to those who have sat on the various incarnations of the trust board, to the volunteers and our members, and indeed the club staff who have supported our efforts to reflect on where we go next. We are in a moment of time that's quite extraordinary. A fantastic, ambitious manager, a young, fearless team, a thriving academy, and two boards, trust and club, who perhaps can acknowledge that it's a time to stop being satisfied with simply being sustainable. We want to prove that our model of ownership is capable of being and delivering the ambition and success that after those 20 years, everybody richly deserves, and I know is desired by Matt Taylor and everybody else at the club. And as an added compliment to the trust members who have worked so hard to keep to save the club and to keep it going, the trust have recently requested that the club repay the loan, some £830,000, to the trust. And we've done this with the full cooperation of the trust, of the club, I beg your pardon, and on the absolute understanding that the club is not disadvantaged by this. As I said earlier, we will strive to make the club self-sufficient by 22-23, and the only guarantee I can give on this is that there's both the will and the determination to make this happen. So it may seem strange, but now more than ever, we need our members' support. We've clearly have a deal of money coming our way, and we have to make some very clear decisions about what happens with that money. But we continue to need your support. This aspiration to be a sustainable League One side, the key being sustainable League One side. It's not just something that Ollie Watkins is going to pay for over a couple of years. It's something that we have to strive to maintain going forward. So we need to grow our membership, and we believe we have an excellent membership secretary, and we will have the technology with the new membership system to do this, to help us in our cause. We need to continue raising money, and you should expect that we will be asking you to donate more during the course of the year and future years. The trust will ensure that we hold appropriate cash reserves on behalf of the club. I know this was raised last year, but of course, if the loan is repaid, we will have the capacity to set aside an amount of money, an appropriate amount of money, to hold on behalf of the club for that sort of rainy day fund. We have funds to pursue our aspirations around shareholding, but please, not at the expense of assisting the club in delivering on the ambitions and targets we set ourselves. There's lots of time and lots of opportunity for us to make significant changes to the club that everybody has already alluded to in terms of our ambition and our desire for success. I've mentioned this on a number of times now. Sustainability is key, but success is what will take us forward. And I really want to shift our thinking away from just keeping our head above water, as we've done for so long and done brilliantly, and start looking forward to a much brighter future. So the 20th anniversary, we hope that when the fans are allowed back in, we will still be able to do something. There are those here this morning who helped save the club all those years ago, those who have progressed it, and those I hope who will want to drive it forward. It's just what everybody at the club and on the trust deserve. So of course, success will ultimately be dependent upon what happens on the pitch. I don't believe that Matt is going to pick Richard anytime soon as a goalkeeper, and despite my best efforts in the boardroom, I think that Matt Taylor probably isn't going to pick me at inside left. We can't really change what happens on the pitch, can we? But what we can do is match the aspirations and the ambition that Matt Taylor has within the business. We have to be equal to his ambition. And I think we're determined to do that. We want to make St James Park and the Clifford Hill training facility the best that we can possibly be. Let's ensure that those facilities match what we want to achieve on the pitch. And I want everybody here today, all of our members, when you stand on the big bank or sit in your seats in the IP office or the Adam Stansfield Stagecoach fan stand, to think, we did this together. This is a supporter-owned club. We did this together. No one individual will ever be able to lay claim to our success or even our failures. We must stand together, trust in club, cooperate, collaborate, be transparent to one another, put our members, our supporters first, and most of all, appreciate one another, be kind to one another. I know that's an overused term sometimes, but we must learn to appreciate and be kind to one another. It's not always been easy. Richard Pym's reflection on romanticism of supporter ownership made me smile. I doubt that there, of course, I know exactly what Richard means, and there is that lovely sense of the community coming together. But I doubt that there are many trustees, past or present, who will reflect on their time as being particularly romantic, unless it's some kind of Gothic novel, or maybe one of those Arthurian romances where gallant knights get torn limb for limb and battle to save a princess in the face of a fire-breathing dragon. And said princess ultimately runs off with her arch enemy anyway. A bit like our youngsters from the academy being pinched by Premier League clubs. But yeah, I'm joking. This is for real. And I guess the point that Richard was making was that we all have to be equal to the challenges. Matt Taylor, I'm sure, will do everything possible on the pitch, everything possible being done at the academy to make us what we aspire to be. So who knows? We are no ordinary football club. There are times when I think we're extraordinary football club. But I have to say, and as a call out to everybody at the club, to all our members, the stronger the trust, the stronger the club. So very happy to answer any questions from our members. Phil, have you got access to questions?
Yes, I have a couple of them. From Tom Farley, why do the trust want the club to repay the loan? What would the trust do differently to the club with the money?
Well, the obvious thing is it's a loan, and people have to pay loans, it's a burden on the balance sheet. I think you'll have noticed that this year it's been expressed as a short-term loan rather than a long-term loan. I've personally, and I believe this is true of the trust board, I don't think we've ever differentiated, but regardless of what bank account money sits in, I don't think we've ever said this is the club's money, this is the trust's money. We know that in the time of need, trust, the reason why most of our members give us money is to help the club. But I think we're able to hold it safe. We're able to, that process of being able to spend the trust money might be a little more or a little better managed.
This is also from Tom, but it's the aim of the trust to reach 75 shareholding in order to amend the club's articles. What does the trust want to amend, and what is it we can't do without amending the articles?
So the 75% shareholding strategic aim has been a strategic aim, as far as I'm aware, since the birth of the trust, or since we become a majority shareholder. It's over the years, I think it's become less and less relevant because we've got the club trust agreement, which kind of shields us from the club being sold or moving to a new ground, or somebody deciding to have us play in green and white. So I think the necessity for a 75% shareholding is much less than it is today. It remains a strategic aim. I don't believe it's at top of our priorities, because we have achieved what 75% would allow us to achieve through other means. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Nick, could I just, sorry to butt in, but can I just add, 75% shareholding would allow the trust to pass a special resolution at a general meeting. At the last general meeting of the club, 2 resolutions were special resolutions that required 75%, and 75% of the attendees, and both were passed. That's the change to the article and cancellation of some shares. So as Nick says, it's of diminishing, for me, it's of diminishing importance, because whilst we don't have 75% per se, the likelihood of there being a general meeting at which 25.01% of those present are opposed to a trust resolution is extremely unlikely. Sorry to butt in.
no, not at all. That's a much better response than I gave, Pete. Thank you.
From, I think it's Chris, can't see. Nick, have the 2 club trust work groups that were established a couple of years ago related to risk and club board performance met formally during the past year? And does a club risk register now exist, and have targets been established to monitor club board members?
I think the risk committee has, we possibly made a mistake, particularly in the risk committee, on both committees actually, that we wanted external people to manage and chair those groups. And of course, the moment that COVID kicked in, people had their own problems to deal with, and that's been a struggle for us. The Performance and Audit Committee has met, and we went through the year-end accounts, and with the club year-end accounts with the club's auditors, and passed our view on those. The Risk Committee has been much harder to bring together. Although Phil, you might have your own view on that because you're a part of it.
I am. I suspect I would observe that the chair is also the chief executive of Exeter Airport. So unfortunately, I suspect his focus has been on his primary business over the last 6 to 9 months for many reasons, which we're well aware. And I suspect Richard will have a view as to how it may go forward.
Richard, I know that your governance is something that's ever evolving, and I wonder if I could invite Richard just to comment briefly on that, because some things go well, some things don't go so well. We always mean well, but we have to learn our lessons when maybe that doesn't work out quite so well as we had hoped. So would you like to express some words there, Richard?
Yes, I'm delighted. It isn't going to work having chairmen of board subcommittees not being on the board, because they don't have the same pressure of reporting back to the board on a monthly basis. And as been said, if a crisis occurs in their main business, that's going to be their focus. And I think it's also difficult to chair a board subcommittee when you're not actually on the board and you're aware of all the issues. So the view that I've got, and as a number of people on this call know, I've made proposals to the club governance group, next week to the trust governance group, to work to a system whereby the chairman of those subcommittees are board directors. And we sort of structure the board around the committee structure and the trust representation. And I think there's a way we can do it neater. So I've made some proposals. They're in the middle of discussion, so it's not appropriate to sort of publicize them yet. But it is an issue we're working on. And I think first of all, we have to do it. We have to do it better than we are. And I think there's an easy way that we can.
Thank you, Richard. Phil, any other questions?
I think it's Adam Henley, but so would Exeter City Council be willing to discuss community asset transfer for SJP to the trust?
Sorry, could you say that again? Because it broke up a bit towards the end.
Would Exeter City Council be willing to discuss a community asset transfer for SJP to the trust?
Quick answer. I've no idea. It's not something that we've asked them. They've been, Exeter City Council have been incredibly good landlords. I think very, very generous. And of course, we've just signed a new 25-year lease. The trust have applied for an asset of community value, and I was a little disappointed that I wasn't able to include it in my words today, because it's due, or the outcome of that application is due anytime soon. But it's an interesting idea and something we'll give some thought to. Julian, you as Director of External Affairs, I know you deal a great deal with the City Council. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? You're on mute, Julian. Some people say that's the best way.
I know. my wife especially. No, I've nothing really to add to what you said. I know that it's been put forward, but where they're going to, how it's going to land, etc. No, but it is something that we need to find out. I think both you and I, Nick, actually need to investigate that.
Yep. Indeed. We are at 11:47, and we were due to close at 11:45. We originally set the start time for 11 o'clock, and then started to worry that the kickoff might be moved, and so we moved it to 10 o'clock, and now the kickoff hasn't been moved. Some things you just can't win, but we will hold all of the questions. If we haven't answered your question, we'll get those on the trust website as quickly as possible. Where I'm able, I will respond to people personally as well as. Can I thank all of our contributors today: John Street, Peter Hoding, Steve Bright, Keith Mason, Richard Pym, and Julian Tagg. Thank you to all of our members for taking the time to attend. There must surely be better things to do on a Saturday morning than attend an AGM. So thank you so much. Thank you for your support. And on a personal level, can I thank the Trust Board and all our officers for the fantastic work and support that they've been for me over the last 3 years. Actually, it's been a real honour and a privilege and a pleasure. Not always, but mostly a pleasure to chair the Trust Board. So thank you everybody so much. I'm going to leave it there. Have a great rest of Saturday. Let's hope for 3 points this afternoon. Extend our unbeaten run. Thank you all so much.